invite you to hear the story of the day his secretary hurled iced coffee in my face, screaming to everyone that my husband was her soulmate. I am Harriet Kane. And calmly, I dialed him. Honey, come down now. Your new soulmate is drenching me in coffee. If you're drawn to stories where patience outlives cruelty and silence carries consequences, subscribe and stay with me. This is not a story that rushes its justice. I arrived at the hospital before most people realized the day had already decided their fate. New York mornings have a way of pretending to be calm while holding their breath, and the lobby reflected that tension perfectly. Marble floors polished to a mirror, glass walls catching the pale light, the constant undertone of machines humming behind clean white doors. I pulled my trench coat tighter, not because I was cold, but because anonymity feels heavier when you carry it by choice. My suitcase rolled behind me, scarred from airports and time zones. It sounds steady, unremarkable, just like the woman everyone assumed I was. No one greeted me. No one recognized me. That too was intentional. I had just returned from a business trip Philip never asked about. He assumed distance meant disinterest, that my absences were retreats from a life that bored me. He never questioned where I went, who I met, or what I signed. For years he believed my silence was dependency. In truth, it was discipline. I didn't stop at reception. I didn't text him. I wanted to walk through the space first, to feel what had changed. Hospitals develop personalities under new leadership, and this one felt louder, sharper, more performative than I remembered. It smelled faintly of antiseptic and coffee, ambition and exhaustion layered together. The place felt hungry. I crossed the lobby slowly, counting steps without thinking about it, when something slammed into my face with shocking force. Cold, wet, violent. Ice shattered against my cheekbone. Liquid soaked my collar, and sticky sweetness crawled down my neck before my brain fully caught up. The shock wasn't pain. It was disbelief. A split second where time bent, where sound flattened, and then everything rushed back at once. Gasps. Laughter. Phones lifting instinctively, like trained reflexes. The taste of sugar and humiliation filled my mouth at the same time. I didn't move right away. The coffee dripped from my hair onto the floor, dark against the pale stone. My blouse clung to my skin, chilled, stained, ruined. Somewhere nearby, someone whispered. Somewhere else, someone laughed too loudly. Then a voice cut through it all, young, sharp, delighted with its own audacity. "Oops," she said, loudly enough to claim the moment. I raised my eyes slowly, because I refused to give her the satisfaction of a flinch. Mia Harlow stood directly in front of me, arms still extended, empty plastic cup dangling between her fingers like a trophy. Her other hand held her phone high, camera angled perfectly. Red live icon pulsing like a heartbeat. She wasn't nervous. She wasn't apologetic. Her smile was triumphant, rehearsed, the smile of someone who believed she had already won. She leaned closer, invading my space, making sure her viewers could see every detail of my soaked coat and unmoving face. She began to speak not to me, but to her audience. She said Philip Vale was her soulmate. She said everyone knew it. She said women like me faded eventually, that time and relevance moved on without asking permission. Each sentence was crafted for effect, for applause, for virality. The comments scrolled fast enough that I couldn't read them clearly, but I caught enough laughter, encouragement, insults sharpened by anonymity. The crowd around us grew thicker, feeding on spectacle the way people always do when they believe they're watching someone else's downfall. I became an object before I became a person. A prop in her performance. No one asked who I was. No one asked if I was all right. The security desk pretended not to see. Power has a way of training people where not to look. I felt the old instinct rise, the urge to explain, to correct, to defend myself against a narrative being built in real time. I let it pass. Explanation gives lies oxygen. Silence, when chosen deliberately, starves them. The coffee continued to drip. I felt it cooling against my skin, seeping into fabric, marking me visibly. I did not wipe my face. I breathed slowly, evenly, grounding myself in sensation. The chill, the weight of my coat, the faint vibration of my phone in my pocket. Mia tilted the camera closer, narrating my stillness as shock, as weakness, as defeat. She mistook composure for surrender. Many people do. I bent down carefully and set my suitcase on the floor, deliberate enough that every movement felt intentional. The lobby quieted slightly, curiosity sharpening. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out my phone. Mia laughed, delighted, assuming I was about to call security or retreat behind authority that wouldn't arrive fast enough. I turned the speaker on before she could speak again. The small click sounded impossibly loud. I dialed Philip Vale. The ringing cut through the lobby like a blade. Conversations softened. Phones tilted. Even Nia paused, curiosity flickering across her expression. When he answered, I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse. I spoke the way I always had, calm, warm, unmistakably certain. I asked him to come down now. I told him his new soulmate was drenching me in coffee. I let the silence afterward stretch just long enough for everyone to hear his breath catch on the other end. Somewhere upstairs, a meeting stalled. Somewhere else, investors shifted in their seats. The elevator chimed faintly in the distance. I stood there, soaked and composed, fully aware that this was no longer a moment of humiliation. It was a hinge. Years of patience, of invisibility, of letting others mistake my silence for absence, converged in that quiet space between his breath and my certainty. And that was when I realized this lobby wasn't witnessing a scandal at all. It was about to witness the precise moment a carefully protected illusion began to collapse, publicly, irrevocably, and with an audience already gathered to watch it happen. If this feels familiar, if you've ever watched a life you built slowly drift into someone else's, spotlight, subscribe, and stay with me. Understanding the illusion is the only way to dismantle it, and illusions don't fall all at once. They crack in layers. People love neat numbers. They loved hearing that Philip and I were married for 20 years, as if longevity alone were proof of success. They pictured anniversaries, loyalty, shared victories. What they didn't see were the long stretches where time moved unevenly, where whole seasons of our marriage passed without memory. Inside those years, I learned that endurance can look identical to happiness from a distance. And that silence, once normalized, becomes the currency of peace. We met when ambition still felt intimate. Philip had the kind of confidence that made rooms listen, and I had the habit of listening before I spoke. In those early days, he praised my calm. He said I steadied him. He liked that I didn't compete for attention, that I let him shine. What he never realized was that I wasn't shrinking. I was studying. I learned how he entered rooms, how he negotiated, how he avoided questions by reframing them as jokes. I learned his tells the way one learns a language. As his career accelerated, our marriage reorganized itself around his ascent. He chased visibility panels, interviews, galas, while I built foundations that didn't require applause. I learned the architecture of institutions, the quiet power of bylaws, the way votes are influenced long before they're cast. At dinners with donors, Philip spoke about vision while I watched reactions, cataloged hesitations, remembered names. I became the keeper of context, the one who noticed patterns and protected continuity. It was invisible work, but it was work nonetheless. At home, the shift was subtle. Conversation shortened. Affection became efficient. He brought the office with him. Emails at the table, calls during celebrations, absences explained as necessity. When I raised concerns, he framed them as misunderstandings. When I asked for presence, he promised time later. I told myself this was normal. Successful marriages adapt. That's what people say when they want permanence without effort. The hospital grew into a symbol of Philip's identity. He spoke of it as if it were an extension of himself, a monument to his leadership. I let him believe that. I attended board functions quietly, introduced investors softly, followed up meticulously. I learned who valued discretion over brilliance, who wanted reassurance more than spectacle. While Philip basked in recognition, I ensured stability. Ownership, I discovered, thrives in quiet rooms. Mia entered our orbit gradually, the way temptations do, small enough at first to be dismissed. Philip mentioned her name casually, praising her efficiency, her loyalty, her understanding of pressure. He liked that she admired him openly. He liked that she made him feel central again. I heard the shift before it was visible. I said nothing. Confrontation, when premature, only teaches people how to hide better. As years passed, I traveled more. Philip never questioned it. He assumed my absences were retreats from a life that bored me, not engagements with a future he wasn't invited into. He didn't ask where I went or what I signed. He didn't wonder why my demeanor changed. Calmer, more deliberate, less reactive. He mistook detachment for dependence. He believed I needed the marriage more than the marriage needed me. What Philip never understood was that silence can be active. While he mistook titles for control, I learned the mechanics beneath them. I invested quietly, diversified patiently, and ensured continuity without attaching my name. I listened when men underestimated me, and I let them. Knowledge accumulated the way interest does, slowly, compounding, inevitable. I wasn't planning a confrontation. I was building insurance. By the time Mia's confidence grew bold enough to spill coffee in a public lobby, the marriage had already ended in every meaningful way. Philip simply hadn't been informed yet. The illusion had protected him, his ego, his narrative, his sense of indispensability. Illusions survive only as long as no one forces them into the light. Standing there, coffee cooling against my skin, I felt no grief for what we had been, only clarity. 20 years of silence hadn't weakened me. It had prepared me. And as the elevator upstairs began its descent, I understood the illusion had done its work. Now it would be dismantled methodically, publicly, and without mercy. If you've ever felt a room decide who you are before you're allowed to speak, you'll understand what unfolded next. Stay with me. If stories of quiet endurance turning into undeniable truth resonate with you, subscribe, because humiliation doesn't peak instantly. It escalates, feeds on attention, and reveals who profits from the noise. Mia sensed momentum the way performers do, the way people who live online learn to smell engagement before it spikes. With Philip still upstairs and my call echoing in the air, she adjusted her stance, angling the camera to catch the coffee stains on my coat, the stillness of my face, the growing semicircle of onlookers. She narrated my composure as proof of guilt, told her viewers silence meant surrender. Her voice lifted, practiced outrage layered with triumph, and the lobby responded, predictably, curiosity sliding into judgment. A few people laughed. Others whispered. Phones rose higher, framing me from every angle. The live comments scrolled fast enough to feel like static. But certain words broke through: homewrecker, old, delusional, move on. It struck me how quickly strangers assign roles when a story is presented confidently enough. Mia framed herself as the future and me as an obstacle, and the audience followed, grateful not to question it. I stood there, absorbing the temperature of the room, the way power manifests in who interrupts and who is ignored. I felt the old reflex twitch, the urge to explain who I was, to say my name, to establish context. I let it pass. Explanation would have shifted the focus away from what mattered. Mia needed opposition to perform against, and I refused to give her that gift. My stillness unsettled her more than shouting ever could. She stepped closer, invading my space, narrating every detail for her viewers, savoring control she believed she had earned. Around us, the hospital continued to function, but at a distance, as if the lobby had become a sealed chamber. The security desk pretended not to notice. Administrators avoided eye contact. Silence, I realized, was not neutrality. It was alignment. People align themselves with whatever they believe will still be standing when the noise fades. Then Dr. David Chen moved. He didn't rush. He didn't shout. He simply placed himself beside me, close enough to shift the balance without touching me at all. His presence changed the geometry of the space. He addressed the room calmly, not Mia, and asked for space. He reminded everyone this was a hospital, not a stage. His voice carried authority earned over years of competence, and it cut through the chatter like a clean incision. Mia pivoted instantly, swinging the camera toward him, delighted by a new target. She accused him of protecting me, of hiding the truth, of being afraid of exposure. Her laughter rang thin, brittle. David didn't flinch. He stated his name and role clearly, asked her to lower the phone, asked the crowd to step back. A few did. Most didn't. The live continued, its appetite growing. I watched the dynamic carefully. Mia fed off reaction, but she also needed validation. When David didn't engage emotionally, her confidence wavered just enough to show cracks. She pressed harder, raising her voice, repeating Philip's name like an incantation. She promised her viewers a reveal. She promised Philip would choose her publicly. The comments surged. Anticipation thickened the air. The coffee on my skin had begun to dry, leaving behind a sticky residue that pulled at fabric when I moved. I noted the sensation, grounding myself in the physical. My breathing slowed. The body remembers composure when the mind is steady. I felt the crowd's gaze slide off Mia and back onto me, confused by my refusal to play the role assigned to me. David leaned in, quiet enough only I could hear. He asked if I wanted him to end this. Loyalty without theatrics. I shook my head once. Not yet, I said. Humiliation, when allowed to peak, leaves no room for denial afterward. Ending it early would have softened the consequences for those who deserve to feel them fully. Mia stepped even closer, angling the camera upward now, trying to provoke tears. She spoke about love as conquest, youth as entitlement. She claimed Philip had promised her everything. Each sentence boxed her in further, though she couldn't see it yet. The lobby buzzed. The elevator chimed faintly somewhere behind us. Heads turned as a ripple moved through the crowd. Phones pivoted instinctively toward the sound. Anticipation sharpened. I felt the moment settle into place, the careful stacking of minutes. The patience of years, the certainty that spectacle had built a stage it could not escape. And that's when I realized the Lev wasn't exposing me at all. It was preserving, in perfect clarity, the exact moment their confidence would collapse, with witnesses already gathered, ready to watch it happen. If you've ever heard a single breath change the direction of a room, you'll understand what happened next. Stay with me, and if stories where patience outlasts arrogance resonate with you, subscribe because this is the moment sound itself became evidence. The ring ended upstairs in a room Philip believed was insulated from consequence. He had been mid-sentence, selling certainty to men who measure futures in decimals, when my voice arrived through the speaker like a quiet fault line. I could picture it without seeing it. The pause, the polite smiles freezing, the way confidence recalibrates when it realizes it has misjudged the room. He answered expecting logistics. He heard exposure. The silence after my words stretched long enough to reveal what panic sounds like when it tries to pass for composure. Down in the lobby, that same silence thickened. Mia tilted her head, listening, her smile tightening as she tried to read what the air already knew. She kept the live running, whispering to her viewers that this was it, that the truth was about to surface. The crowd leaned in collectively, hungry for resolution, mistaking proximity for understanding. I stood still, phone steady in my hand, aware that every second now belonged to the record. Upstairs, Philip's colleagues exchanged glances. A question formed and died before it could be asked. The men who had invested in his vision sensed instability the way animals sense weather. He muted himself too late. The scrape of a chair, the rushed exhale, the word "excuse me" slipped out anyway. The room didn't stop him. Rooms rarely stop men they believe are indispensable. They simply remember. When he came back on the line, his voice had shifted. Softer. Careful. He asked where I was as if the answer could contain the problem. I told him. I described the lobby in neutral terms, named the stain on my coat without embellishment, named the woman holding the phone without accusation. I spoke like someone reading minutes aloud. Mia laughed for the camera, triumphant, convinced this was the prelude to her coronation. Philip said my name then, my full name, and the sound of it traveled through the lobby with unexpected force. It cut through the whispers, pulled eyes toward me, recalibrated the story Mia had been telling. She flinched, barely perceptible, then recovered, adding commentary for her viewers, translating his concern as guilt. She narrated over him, over me, over the moment, trying to keep control of the frame. Upstairs, the investors had begun to listen. Phones were set face down. Pens paused. One man asked a question that didn't need an answer. Is this about the hospital? Philip said no too quickly. Another man leaned back, weighing risk. I heard it all in the way Philip stopped breathing between sentences, in the way he chose reassurance over clarity. Silence is honest when words are strategic. In the lobby, Dr. David Chun shifted closer, not to protect me, but to witness. He understood, instinctively, that moments like this require corroboration, not intervention. The security desk finally stirred, unsure whose authority to obey. Mia raised her voice, promising her audience a reveal any second now. Promising Philip would come down and choose her publicly. The comments surged. Anticipation sharpened into certainty. I let Philip hear the room phones chiming, a laugh that cut too loud, the soft drip of coffee hitting marble. I let him hear what he had allowed to grow. When he said he was coming down, I thanked him. Gratitude confuses panic. I ended the call first, decisively, the click echoing louder than the ring had. The elevator chimed again, closer this time. The crowd parted instinctively, creating a corridor of expectation. Mia lifted her phone higher, angling for dominance, rehearsing victory with her smile. I adjusted my coat once, smoothing the stained fabric, grounding myself in the weight of what was already decided. And that's when I realized the call had done its work. Not by accusing, not by pleading, but by placing everyone exactly where they needed to be when the doors finally opened. If you've ever watched power arrive late and still expect the room to bow, you'll recognize the posture Philip carried with him. Stay with me, and if stories where arrogance meets its mirror speak to you, subscribe, because this is the moment masks slip, not quietly but under lights no one can dim. The elevator doors opened and Philip stepped out as if the building still belonged to him. His suit was immaculate, his smile practiced, but sweat darkened the edge of his collar, and his eyes searched too quickly. He scanned faces, counted phones, registered David's presence beside me, and finally saw the coffee staining my coat. The calculation happened in seconds. He tried to laugh it off, to compress the chaos into a misunderstanding. Rooms like this are trained to forgive confidence. Today, the room hesitated. Mia surged forward, camera lifted, voice bright with triumph. She announced him like a prize, narrating for her viewers that this was the moment he would choose. She reached for his arm as if it were already hers. Philip flinched not from her touch, but from the camera inches from his face. He said her name sharply, a warning disguised as familiarity. The crowd leaned in, phones steadied, silence sharpened. He turned to me, softened his tone, tried to perform concern. He asked if I was all right. I met his eyes without blinking and said nothing. Silence again, deliberate, waited. He glanced at the stain, then at the onlookers, then back to Mia, whose smile had begun to wobble. The live comments surged. Anticipation tightened like a held breath. Mia spoke over him, claiming a love, claiming inevitability. She said he promised her everything. She said he was afraid to say it out loud. She raised the phone higher, angling for a close-up, narrating the scene faster, louder, afraid the moment might slip if she didn't fill it with sound. Philip's jaw tightened. He told her to stop. She laughed. The slap was not dramatic in the way movies make it. It was sharp, sudden, and unmistakable. A crack of sound that sliced through the lobby and froze every screen mid-frame. Mia staggered back, shock wiping her smile clean. Phones captured everything. The room inhaled as one. Philip's hand hovered in the air for half a second too long before he dropped it, realizing what he had just done. He began to apologize to me, to the room, to no one in particular. Words spilled fast, disorganized, trying to stitch control back together. He called it a mistake. He called it confusion. He called it stress. He tried to frame the slap as discipline, the affair as rumor, the coffee as an accident. Each word dug him deeper because the audience had already seen enough. David spoke then, calm and precise. He asked Philip to step back. He reminded him this was a hospital. He named the live stream and asked Mia to end it. She didn't. She stared at Philip, betrayed and terrified, understanding too late that the narrative had turned on her. The comments shifted tone. Applause became questions. Certainty cracked. Philip reached for me, palms open, eyes pleading now. He asked to talk privately. He promised explanations. He promised repair. He promised whatever he thought might stop the momentum. I stepped back once, just enough to create space, and finally spoke. I told him this was not private. Not anymore. My voice carried, steady and unraised, and the room leaned toward it. I thanked Mia for documenting the truth so thoroughly. I thanked Philip for arriving on time. I asked everyone to listen carefully. because what came next would be brief. The security desk straightened. The crowd stilled. Even Mia lowered the phone a fraction, instinctively sensing a turn she couldn't control. And that's when I felt the shift complete. The moment where spectacle surrendered to authority, and I knew the next words would end more than a marriage. They would reassign power in a room that had mistaken noise for ownership. If you've ever watched a room realize it chose the wrong narrator, you'll understand the stillness that followed. Stay with me, and if you value stories where authority is revealed rather than announced, subscribe, because this is the moment truth stopped asking permission. I spoke without raising my voice, because authority doesn't need volume to travel. I said my name slowly, clearly, the way one does when correcting a record. I thanked the staff for their patience and the viewers for their attention, and I asked Mia to keep recording. Transparency, I explained, protects everyone, especially institutions. The word institutions changed the air. Philip's shoulders tightened. He recognized that word. It belonged to rooms where decisions are permanent. I explained that I was not there to argue or to perform. I was there to conclude. I named the hospital as a public trust with private obligations, a place where governance matters more than charisma. I reminded the room that bylaws exist to prevent exactly what they had just witnessed. People shifted. Pens came out. Phones steadied. David took one step back, not retreating, but making space the way allies do when the center belongs to someone else. Then I said the number. 60%. I said it once, evenly, without emphasis, because emphasis would have suggested doubt. I explained my role as the majority shareholder, quiet by design, protective by necessity. I described how ownership can be exercised without visibility, how stewardship prefers discretion. Murmurs rippled, then quieted. Numbers don't argue. They settle. Philip tried to interrupt. He said my name again, softer now, urgent. I lifted a hand not to silence him, but to pause the room, and continued. I stated that executive authority serves at the pleasure of the board, and that majority ownership initiates that pleasure. I cited the clause, the vote threshold, the immediate effect. I wasn't dramatic. I was precise. Precision landed harder. Mia's phone dipped as her grip weakened. She whispered my name as if it were new information, her face rearranging itself around comprehension too late. The comments on her live shifted again, confusion replacing applause, questions replacing certainty. She tried to speak. No one listened. Philip's mouth opened and closed without sound. The building seemed to exhale. I announced the termination succinctly. Effective immediately. Both roles named. Security protocols initiated. HR notified. Interim leadership confirmed. I thanked Philip for his service and Mia for her enthusiasm, and I wished them clarity in their next chapters. Politeness can be devastating when it arrives with consequence. The security desk moved with relief. Direction finally clear. I addressed the staff next, not as a scold but as a steward. I reminded them why hospitals exist, why trust matters, why professionalism protects patients and reputations alike. I thanked David publicly for modeling restraint. He nodded once, eyes steady, understanding the value of witnessing without spectacle. The room recalibrated around a new center of gravity. Philip found his voice then, pleading now, asking for a private word, promising restitution, offering explanations he believed still had currency. I told him there would be no scene, no debate, no bargaining. Decisions, I said, are kinder when they are clean. I instructed him to leave the premises with dignity intact. Dignity is a gift you can give even when you are owed nothing. I adjusted my coat, smoothing the stain that had become incidental. Mia was escorted gently, still filming until the last possible second, her narrative collapsing in real time. Phones lowered. Whispers softened into process. The lobby returned to function, altered but intact. I took one breath, centered, and allowed myself the smallest pause. And that's when I realized power doesn't announce itself with thunder. It concludes with paperwork, walks away without applause, and leaves behind a silence that everyone understands but no one dares to challenge. If you've ever watched consequences move faster than apologies, you'll recognize the speed of the collapse that followed. Stay with me, and if you believe endings can be firm without being cruel, subscribe, because this is where noise finally gives way to order. Security did not rush. They didn't need to. Authority had already shifted, and everyone felt it. Procedures replaced spectacle. Phones lowered as if the air itself had asked for quiet. Philip stood where he was for a moment too long, calculating angles that no longer existed. He tried one last time to speak to me privately, a hand hovering near my sleeve, the old familiarity reaching for relevance. I stepped aside, not sharply, just enough to remind him that access had changed. Access is the first privilege to go. Upstairs, consequences were already cascading. The investors who had heard the call didn't need explanations. They needed certainty. Calendars reshuffled. Meetings ended early. A contract Philip had courted for months, lucrative, public-facing, dependent on reputational stability, paused, then withdrew. Risk committees don't shout, they decide. By the time the elevator carried Philip back up, his phone was vibrating with losses that don't trend but endure. Mia's descent was faster, louder, and far less dignified. Escorted gently but firmly, she narrated her own unraveling until the doors closed and the signal dropped. The live ended mid-sentence. Online, clips multiplied without her control coffee arcing. The slap frozen, my voice calm and final. Virality has a way of amplifying exactly what it was meant to distort. The comments turned. Sympathy evaporated. Certainty reversed itself. I addressed the staff once more, briefly. I thanked them for returning to their work and reminded them that professionalism isn't an accessory, it's infrastructure. I promised stability, continuity, and respect for process. Promises matter when they're backed by mechanism. David met my eyes and inclined his head. No applause followed. That was intentional. Philip reappeared at a distance, pale now, moving with the caution of someone who understands he is being watched, without being protected. He texted apologies that sounded like strategy, then promises that sounded like bargaining. I didn't reply. Clean endings require restraint. I authorized interim leadership and initiated a remote separation of personal and corporate matters. Divorce does not need drama to be decisive. I walked toward the exit, heels steady on marble, the stain on my coat now a footnote. The lobby resumed its rhythm, elevators breathing, conversations restarting, purpose reclaiming space. Outside, the city waited, indifferent and honest. I breathed in cold air and felt the relief that comes when performance ends. Behind me, Philip's world continued to contract titles suspended, access revoked, rooms closing their doors politely but permanently. He would ask for time. He would ask for forgiveness. He would ask for relevance. Time would answer him. Forgiveness would be mine to give or withhold. Relevance had already moved on. I paused once, not to look back, but to decide what came next. Expansion requires focus. Institutions grow when stewardship is boring and relentless. I adjusted my coat, squared my shoulders, and stepped forward into a future that no longer needed explanation. And that's when I understood the most elegant exits don't announce victory. They simply make room for what must continue after the noise has finally gone quiet. If you've stayed with me this far, you already know this isn't a victory lap. It's an accounting. And if stories where renewal arrives without shouting speak to you, subscribe, because what lasts is built after the room empties and the cameras turn away. In the weeks that followed, the hospital returned to its work with a steadiness that felt earned. Interim leadership became permanent leadership. Processes tightened. Quiet audits corrected what charisma had loosened. I didn't give interviews. I didn't issue statements beyond what governance required. Institutions heal when attention shifts from faces to function. I visited floors unannounced, listened more than I spoke, and thanked people who had kept the lights on when the narrative tried to steal the power. Philip wrote often at first. Long messages, careful apologies, memories arranged like offerings. He asked for meetings, for explanations, for the chance to be heard without witnesses. I declined politely, consistently. Closure does not require consensus. Over time, his messages shortened, then stopped. Silence found him the way it had once served me. Only this time, it carried consequence instead of preparation. Mia disappeared from my life quickly and completely. The internet finished what it started, not with cruelty, but with indifference. Virality burns hot and then moves on, leaving those who chased it blinking in the dark. I did not watch the clips. I did not read the threads. I learned long ago that distance is a form of mercy, especially toward oneself. Work expanded. Not dramatically, but correctly. We invested in systems, in people, in redundancies that protect care when egos falter. I mentored quietly. I delegated deliberately. Authority, when exercised without spectacle, becomes dependable. The hospital grew stronger not because a scandal ended, but because governance resumed its rightful place. On a personal level, renewal arrived in small, practical ways. I moved apartments. I donated clothes that no longer fit the woman I had become. I reclaimed mornings, walking without destination, coffee without urgency, silence without threat. The stain on my coat was long gone, but the lesson it carried remained precise. I thought often about the lobby, about how quickly rooms choose stories when someone speaks loudly enough. I thought about how easily composure is mistaken for weakness, and how often patience is misread as absence. The truth is simpler. Power prefers calm because calm can wait, calm can count, calm can conclude. David and I remained friends, no more, no less. Respect does not need escalation to be meaningful. He checked in when it mattered, never intruded when it didn't. Loyalty like that is rare because it resists performance. It exists whether or not anyone is watching. The marriage ended cleanly. Assets separated without theater. Names returned to their proper places. I did not feel lost the way people expect. I felt alignment. Some relationships teach you who you were. Others teach you who you are not willing to be again. Both have value. Only one deserves continuation. Years later, when people ask what happened that day, I tell them the truth without embellishment. A mistake was made. Governance corrected it. Life continued. I do not mention coffee or cameras unless asked. Memory sharpens what matters and lets the rest fade. This is the lesson I carry forward. Revenge is loud when it's uncertain. Justice is quiet when it's prepared. Build in silence. Speak once, leave cleanly. And let what you steward speak for you long after the room has forgotten the noise.